Hello, welcome to our Monday Business News Report. We now start off with highlight of the week that was. The federal government says that Nigeria Air will commence operations with 3 wet-leased aircraft. Wet-lease is an arrangement covering the hire of an aircraft, including the provision of a flight crew and sometimes fuel. On Wednesday, the Federal Executive Council approved April 2022 as the takeoff date of the airline, and the Minister Hadi Sirike disclosed this during a press briefing on Thursday. Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more, I have Chukwuemeka Achum, Chief Operating Officer of Jet Support Services Limited. Good to have you on the breakfast show this morning.
Thank you for having me, David.
We've had mixed reactions with this particular project. Now we saw the initial suspension. There was a whole lot of uproar. Why are we going this direction? But it's also good to see that now the project is on track, and some commendations have also come within the light. Others are also saying, well, we have to wait till we see the full implementation before we clap to this achievement. Your thoughts on all of these different feelers we are having from the aviation sector?
Well, yes, I believe we did have some minor setbacks on the part of the federal government, and it seemed that the project was more or less kept in the cooler. But the Minister of Aviation had always insisted that, you know, this project was close to his heart. And I mean, good news coming from the Ministry of Aviation. And we do hope that, you know, implementation would more or less you know, stick to
and talking about operational efficiency, we are looking at April 2022, starting off with wet-leased aircraft as well. Some are also of the view that, well, how will we likely see this play out, especially for a national carrier still heavily dependent on such operational, quote-unquote, inefficiency?
Well, I mean, there are several examples in the past of, you know, other airlines that have started with this kind of model. Even the biggest airline, Emirates, you know, started with, you know, leased airplanes. In terms of regulatory requirements, you know, it's a little bit still sketchy how that would, you know, happen, because, I mean, what we do know is that the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority requires, you know, Nigerian registered aeroplanes, you know, to kick off any AOC application. But I'm sure, you know, these are thoughts or conversations that are already going behind, and we might see some adaptation from the Civil Aviation Authority.
And before we now have the new set of airplanes come, that's looking at 3 to 5 years' time. But in terms of this week now, we're starting off this week, the ministry is also calling out for proposals to investors who are keen on owning some shares of this national carrier. What sort of confidence do you think this would also bring to the market, especially with regards to operational efficiency, knowing that government is not going to solely carry out this project? And we're also going to see it also being quoted on the Nigerian exchange as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, government has indicated that it will not hold more than 5% equity, which, you know, gives an insight into the kind of investment that is. It's more or less catalytic rather than, you know, control or dividend-oriented investment. So government is more or less, you know, putting its stake on this project. And in terms of operational efficiencies, I mean, yes, we know the talk about, you know, government not doing business, or nobody encourages government to do business. Business should be purely run by private organizations. But it is showing that, okay, government is looking into allowing private investors control the airline more or less.
Well, details are still very sketchy. When we're talking about sketchy details, we don't have the full information as to how this whole kickoff process. We barely have a quarter to prep up for Nigeria Air to take off. But in the area of best case and worst case scenario, what are some of the highlights or red flags you expect us to deal with? And within the area of oversight function, taking cues from other entrants that we've had in the market, not making the same old mistakes, especially for a national carrier?
Well, I think the first advantage is jobs. I mean, we've talked about severally how we intend to diversify this economy, and you know, I mean, across all sectors, this is what we expect to see. Bringing that down to aviation, we know that government is not the best at doing business. I think government has realized it. It also looks, you know, a bit difficult to see how we can achieve April 2022 start-off dates. But I do believe that a lot of work has been going on in the background, and what we do see right now is just, you know, a manifestation of all of the background information going on. But I mean, jobs. We need that buzz, you know, and it couldn't come at the right time, David.
Okay, let's also look at the call for maintenance, repair and overhaul facilities. We've always had this conversation, and this is one of the biggest challenges we have in the aviation sector in Nigeria. We're expecting we would also see this facility also take operation come next year as part of the highlights of what the minister said as well. 12,000 hectares of land will be used for this facility. Are you optimistic about this move?
Well, in theory, yes, and I mean,
it's an expensive project to take on.
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, that is all we want. We want to see investments come into aviation. We want to see not just, you know, financial investments. We want to see technical investments come into aviation. We want to see transfer of knowledge. We want to see, you know, the Nigerian aviation live up to what we do know. You know, it can live up to. It has. Aviation has been here for quite a long time, David, but we've still not yet been able to, you know, cascade it to that level where, you know, it should be. So I'm confident. I do believe that, I mean, the outline business case is still not public document, but I do believe from the excerpts we've heard, seems more or less like, you know, good news coming to the aviation industry. And
then if in the worst case scenario, we don't necessarily have this aircraft come to bear, the new orders that we're expecting that should come in the next 3 to 5 years, some have also said, why don't we take on all these other aviation companies or airlines that already have aircraft and have some synergy and use under the umbrella of the national carrier?
I believe those are two completely different scenarios. You know, I mean, the AMCON-held airlines, you know, which I think you're referring to, is a completely different setup from this national carrier. Again, I mean, yes, the minister says that it will take 3 to 5 years, but I think it's going to be the prerogative of whichever technical equity investor that will be driving
that process.
Fast-track that process. Aircraft selection, you know, what kind of airplanes they would deploy, what kind of routes they will fly, would solely be the responsibility of whoever is nominated or selected as a technical equity investor.
Okay. Now we just have barely less than a minute to wrap up this conversation. Now let's look at how this move would also catalyze the aviation sector in Nigeria. We're still looking at 2023 to 2026 before we get to the pre-COVID level. And I know your stance. Well, we cannot compare 2019 to any year, 2020 or 2021. So how do you see this catalyzing the aviation sector further?
Yeah, I think that's the key word here. You know, the catalysis that this will bring to the aviation industry. First thing is, I mean, it's not going to be government run. It is clearly. So we're going to, hopefully, if, you know, we select the right investors, the technical investors, we're going to see a lot of innovation. We're going to see, you know, government has, you know, more or less revealed their playbook. The airports are being privatized. And the privatization of the airports solely aimed at supporting, you know, the expansion of the Nigerian airlines. So I do believe that the Nigeria Air Initiative is, you know, a very worthy concept, and I can't wait to see it.
And has come to stay.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Well, we keep our fingers crossed and see how high the Nigerian flag is going to fly when we have the commencement of operations start in April next year. Thank you very much for your time on the show this morning. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Chukwuemeka Achim.
Thank you, David.